It's Vlogmas Day 22 and it is time to discuss all of the shows I've seen at the theatre this year. This could be a long video. Hi everyone, my name is Chloe, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here today. Today's video is Vlogmas video. I am posting a new video on my channel every day in December up to and including Christmas Day. We're doing a mixture of bookish and theatrical content. Today we're back being a little bit stagey and we're going to talk through every single show that I have seen in the year of 2022. So now I say every show, what I mean by this is every show that I've seen in a theatre. So we're going to talk about your regular stage shows, sort of musicals, plays, the things that you would expect to go and see. We're also going to talk about a couple of different concerts, some that are concert versions of musicals, some that are concerts that took place in a theatre. These are all basically concerts that are musical theatre actors doing concerts. So it's not going to be like a random band's going to appear on here, but basically these are all shows that are to do with theatre. And I'm not going to go into too much in-depth detail about each one, but I am going to give you a sort of wrap up of every show that I've been to see, very quick thoughts on each one. I mean like a sentence on each one. I'm going to hold myself to that because I tend to ramble, and I'll give you a very quick star rating for each one. I say quick star rating because I'm not going to start justifying things either, because I know that for some of them I've seen the show multiple times and the star rating changes depending on which time I went to go and see it. So, you know, little context apart from that very quick review. We're just going to power through. So I feel like I'm rambling a lot just explaining this, and I have a lot of shows to talk about, so maybe what we should do is just start listing them. Okay, so I've counted these up and I think I'm correct in saying that I've been to see 42 different shows at the theatre this year. Little bit annoyed that I couldn't have seen like 10 more and got it to an average of one a week, but you know, things to aim for next year. And actually no, I've just realised there's one more thing that I should include that wasn't technically in a theatre, but I will explain that one when I get to it. So I'm going to say it's 43 things that I've been to see this year, which is even more annoying because now I'm 9 away from one a week. So we're going to do these in order. We'll go back to the beginning of the year, which was January. January I actually ended up having a couple of shows cancelled because I got COVID, but the first show that I was actually able to go and see was Bonnie and Clyde. This was a stage concert version of Bonnie and Clyde with Jeremy Jordan and Frances Mailey McCann. My main takeaway from this show is just how excited I was to get to see Jeremy Jordan actually act in something after seeing him in concerts previously. I'm giving it a 5-star. Same weekend I ended up going to see Moulin Rouge for the first time. Loved the show but not so keen on the cast. I'm going to give it a lower end 4-star. I should also actually tell you where I went to see these ones. So Bonnie and Clyde was at the Theatre Royal Drury Lane in London, Moulin Rouge was at the Piccadilly Theatre in London, and then the next show that I went to see was in February, and that was in Bradford. I went to go and see The Addams Family with my sister. Second time I've seen The Addams Family, didn't love it as much as the first time because again I just preferred the cast the first time I saw it, but it was a solid 4-star. Then didn't see anything else in February, so we're going to jump to March when I went to the Gillian Lynn Theatre in London and went to see Cinderella, specifically to sit in the seats that moved with the stage, which made the overall experience so much better. So this is a weird one for star ratings because for the show it's probably a lower end 4-star, and it's only really a 4-star because the cast was so brilliant. The story itself is probably a 3-star, but then the experience of it is a 5-star because I had such a good time like being sat front row and then being in the moving seats. So I suppose we'll say that it was a solid 4-star. It was right down the middle of all those ratings. But I know I said I wasn't going to justify it too much, but that one was just too awkward to not try and justify it. Next up, we had the first show that I went to see in Sheffield. I went to the Lyceum to see Dreamgirls. This is the third time that I've seen this show. Probably didn't enjoy it as much as when I saw it in London, but really liked the Effie that we saw this time, and the show continues to be fantastic. Still a solid 4-star. At the end of March I went to the Turbine Theatre in London to see But I'm a Cheerleader, which is the new musical. The Turbine is a venue to showcase its new musicals. I really loved the film when I first watched it many years ago, and this was just a really fun, uplifting adaptation, and I had a great time. Although I did feel that there were still things that needed to be worked on with the musical, I'll give it sort of a lower end 4-star. In April I was back in Sheffield at the Lyceum to see the touring production of Six. This is again the third time I've been to see this show, and as with Dreamgirls, didn't love it as much as when I saw it in London. I have not seen it in the new theatre in London. I've seen it when it was at the Arts Theatre, which is a smaller venue, and I think it really worked in that more intimate setting, and it lost some of what I loved about it being in a bigger theatre. So whilst the show was still a higher 4-star, like a 4.5, the experience was a lower 4-star. So again, we'll just say it was a solid 4-star. Probably already noticed I'm always going to be fairly generous with my ratings, because even when there's shows that I don't love too much, just like the effort that's been involved in putting these shows on is always going to pull up the star ratings for me. But also I did really love a lot of the stuff that I saw at the theatre this year. At the end of April I had a trip down to London, and the first show I went to see was at the Noel Coward Theatre, and that was Dear Evan Hansen. I went to see it one last time before it closed. There are definitely issues with this show, and I feel like it hasn't necessarily aged the best, but even knowing that, being sat at this show and and seeing the emotions that are being portrayed on stage, it was very, very hard for me to not be greatly affected by it. So for me, this is probably still a 4.5 experience. The only reason it's probably not a 5 is that I saw a couple of different performers than when I saw it the first time, and I preferred the cast I saw the first time. But really, I'm still definitely in love with this show, and I'm kind of sad that I didn't go and see it one more time before it closed. I then went to the Gielgud Theatre and went to see a play. I went to see To Kill a Mockingbird. This is a book that I studied at school. It's a play that I've been wanting to see for a long time. I felt like it was a very, very good adaptation of the book, and the performances were all fantastic. This one probably was a 5-star play. I then went to the Arts Theatre and I saw Bonnie and Clyde. This time not the stage concert version. This was a fully staged musical, and while it still featured Frances Mailey McCann, it had Jordan Luke Gage instead of Jeremy Jordan, which I wasn't sure if I was going to love him as much because Jeremy Jordan, but it turns out that Jordan Luke Gage is absolutely fantastic in this role, and this was definitely a 5-star experience for me. We're into May now. We're back in Sheffield at the Lyceum, and I went to see Bat Out of Hell. Didn't particularly love the show. It just wasn't one for me. Would probably give that by itself a 3-star, but I had the worst experience I've ever had in a theatre in terms of the rest of the audience sat around me who seemed to think that it was fine to sing so loudly that you couldn't actually hear the performers on stage, and it was just generally not a great experience in a theatre. So the experience was a 1-star. As I said, the show was a 3-star, so we'll put it as a 2, I suppose, and that is going to be the lowest rating that I give in this video. Back at the Lyceum a week later, I went to go and see the Cher show. It was a fun time. It was a fun experience. I don't think it's one that I'm going to rush to go and see again. It's probably like a 3.5. It was a fun night. There were some good performances in it, but definitely not going to be like a new all-time favourite show. And I've realised that yes, I am starting to justify these a lot more. I'm going to try and speed through it because we're still only in May. Although actually the next one is in June. I went to the Regent's Park Open Air Theatre in London and went to go and see Legally Blonde the musical. This is the 3rd time I've seen this show. It was a completely different production to how I've ever seen it before. It was modernised and I was so nervous about that before I went into it, but it actually ended up being my favourite version of this show that I've ever seen, and this is going to be a 5-star show. I then went to the Sondheim Theatre in London. I went to see Les Mis for the first time this year, the 23rd time in total, and yes, it was a 5-star. Obviously it's never not going to be a 5-star. I will say though that I saw Les Mis twice this year, and of the sort of 2 central characters who are in conflict throughout it, you've got Valjean and you've got Javert. I saw the cover for Valjean one of the times I went to see it alongside a Javert that I really love because Bradley Jaden was still in it at the time, and then when I went back the second time I saw a Valjean that I really love, which is John Robbins, alongside the person who had now taken over the role of Javert. So basically I saw 2 of my favourite performers but not on at the same time, which is a little bit sad, but I have seen them perform together before. And even though it meant that I saw people who maybe weren't my favourite versions of those characters, it's still not, it still wouldn't change the rating. Les Mis will always be a 5-star show. Into July now, and I went to the Palladium to see Beauty and the Beast. This is the 2nd time I've seen this, and again it was a very different production to the first time I'd seen it. I appreciated some parts of it. It felt like much more of a classic theatre production as opposed to the last version I saw that felt a little bit more broad and a bit more like what you would see at a Disney theme park. This felt like sort of everything from like the costume into the choreography just seemed to have a different tone to it, and I did very much enjoy that. I enjoyed the performances, but there was just something about it that I just felt like didn't quite click properly. So it's probably like a 3.5 or a low 4. So I was then back at the Piccadilly Theatre to see Moulin Rouge for the 2nd time this year. As before, loved the show, didn't love the cast. I'll give it a low 4-star, and we'll come back to this one later on. I don't know if I said that last one was in July, but we are in July now, and the next one that I saw was back at the Arts Theatre to see Bonnie and Clyde again. The first 2 times I saw Bonnie and Clyde, I would give it a 5-star. This time probably like a 4.5, maybe a 4. Not so much there was anything wrong with the show, but it was just a little bit disjointed because we did end up having a show stop and then having to have a change of actor for Clyde about 2/3 into the show. The guy who took over was very, very good, but it did just sort of take me out of the experience for a moment because obviously I've been used to seeing one person play the role, and the next time they came on stage it was someone different. So just like a different experience as a whole, and just not like my favourite time that I've seen the show this year. That would be the 2 other times that I saw it. Back in Sheffield at the Lyceum, I went to see Singing in the Rain. 2nd time I've seen it. Felt like the production was a little bit smaller this time than when I saw it in Manchester previously. Felt like it didn't actually rain enough when they were doing Singing in the Rain. Like, you were splashing around and there wasn't that much water kicking up. Did disappoint me just a little bit, but I'm still going to give it a 4-star. And then at the end of July, still at the Lyceum, I went to see School of Rock on tour. 2nd time I've seen this show, and again just didn't love it as much as when I saw it in London. I don't know if it was a difference with the cast or just sort of the atmosphere when I was there, but it's a very fun show that can sometimes sort of tip over the edge of being just that little bit irritating, and I felt like this time it kind of went over that edge just a little bit more, so I'm going to give it a 3.5. Back to Bradford. This time I'm meant to go and see Waitress. It's probably the last time I'm going to get to see this show for a while. It's the 11th time I've seen it as a whole, but it's probably the last time I'm going to get to see it because the tour is now finished and we don't know when or if it will ever be performed professionally in the UK again, which makes me very, very sad. This is another show that's always going to get a 5-star from me. It's not my favourite time I've ever seen this show because there are members of the West End cast that I got particularly attached to. That some of them had gone on the tour initially and then had left it by this point. One of them had actually come to join the tour by this point, which is why I went to see it. I went to see David Hunter as Dr. Pomatter for one last time. He did not disappoint, and to be honest, there was no one I could particularly fault in this performance of it. It's just that, like I said, I'm so attached to some of the other cast members, but that did not take anything away from it. It's still a 5-star. Apparently I didn't see very much in August because we're now at the very end of August when I went to the Theatre Royal Drury Lane to see Jeremy Jordan in concert. So this was an actual concert. There was no sort of storyline to it, although actually he did do a couple of songs where he sort of told stories from his like personal life through song, because which is always a really great thing to see how he does that, because every single time it just gets to me. I end up crying at Jeremy Jordan concerts near enough every single time I go. It's the third time I've seen him in concert, and ignoring one section in the middle that I didn't particularly love, everything else was fantastic, particularly the bit where he did a medley of songs that were on in shows that are currently on in London, and he sang songs from Heathers and Moulin Rouge, and I had a great time. This was a 5-star concert. Back in Sheffield at the Lyceum to see Beautiful, the Carole King musical. This is one that I just kind of thought, well, it's touring, I should probably go and see it, see if it's any good, and it was fine, but it's not something that I will ever go out of my way to see again. It was just a very down the middle 3-star. By the way, that one was in September, and so the next two that I'm going to talk about, the first one I went to the Victoria Palace Theatre in London and went to see Hamilton. This is a 4th time I think seeing this show, and every time I go and see this show I remember how much I love it. I sort of forget about it in between seeing it, and then when I see it on stage I'm just like, oh my god, it is so good. Like, it is so well crafted. It is obviously a 5-star production. And then on the same day I went to the other palace. I went with Becca to go and see Heathers. We were sat front row. We were very, very much in the action. Again, a show that I sort of forget how much I love until I actually see it in person. This is the 4th time I've seen this show, and I'm probably going to end up giving this particular time I saw it a 4.5. Now the reason being that the first 2 times I saw it I loved it so much, and I love that cast so much, and there were just things that I didn't love quite as much in this version of it, but I do know that I liked this version a lot more than I saw it on tour last year, and I would probably have rated that one a 4. So tour last year was a 4, original London cast was a 5, and then this one was a 4.5 right down the middle. Into October, and I went to Chester with Meg to go and see The Time Traveller's Wife, which is a new musical, which is always a slightly different experience because I did not know any of the songs of the show going into it because it was literally the first time it had been performed. At least when I saw But I'm a Cheerleader early on in the year, that had workshops and things, and I'd heard a few of the songs by that point. This one I had no clue whatsoever, and I was pleasantly surprised by it. I think there are a lot of things that they still need to work on if they are planning on taking this show further, but it was a very sort of positive start for this production, and I would give it a solid 4-star. Still in October, and we had the thing that I kind of forgot to add to the list because it wasn't actually in a theatre, but I'm gonna have to count in this. I went to Musical Con with Becca. Musical Con, as the name would suggest, is a convention all about musical theatre. There were various performances on stage throughout the weekend from lots of different cast. There was a reunion for In the Heights and for Rent. There was the 4 Elphabas from Wicked singing Defying Gravity together. There were so many performances to watch that it would be wrong for me to leave it off of this list. I'm gonna give the whole thing a 4-star rating. The fun of the performances and things like that would probably be a 5, but there were some like teething issues with it being their first con, and that does bring it down to a 4 instead. But I had a great time, and I will be going back in 2023. During that weekend I did go and see some other things. So me and Becca went to the Adelphi Theatre to see Back to the Future. I enjoyed this one a lot more than I thought I would. I was a little bit worried about how they would translate the film into a musical, and I felt like they handled it really well. Again, a very solid 4-star rating. And then I went to another musical theatre concert. This one was at a new venue which is called Here at Alternet, which is in London, and it was Jordan Lou Gage, who I'd already seen earlier on in the year, and Bonnie and Clyde. This was a very, very good concert. I thought it was a nice mix of sort of hearing him sing songs from shows that he'd been in, some shows that he just really enjoyed, and then also some stuff that was completely not musical theatre at all. And that ending with Raise Little Hell into Bat Out of Hell was so good, and this was definitely a 5-star concert. Back in Sheffield, but this time at the City Hall, I went to see a concert that was Kerry Ellis and Louise Diamond, who are 2 actresses who've been in Wicked. Kerry Ellis has played Elphaba, Louise Diamond has played Elphaba and Glinda. I ended up getting an offer for really cheap tickets for this. Thought, why not go and see it? It was a fun night, but it felt like a little bit stale compared to some of the other musical theatre concerts that I've been to see. Like, they literally sort of walked out on stage, sang a song, and then disappeared, and the other one came back on, and then they sang a couple of songs together. It just didn't feel like it had the atmosphere that I wanted it to have. So I would give it a 3-star. Like, the singing itself would have been a much higher rating, but the overall thing was a little bit lackluster. Okay, I promise we are nearly at the end now because we are into November, but I did see quite a lot of shows in November. The first one, I went to the Almeida and saw Tammy Faye, which is a new musical. Again, I knew nothing of the songs going into it, but I was very excited to see it because Andrew Rannells was in it, was a musical theatre performer that I really, really like. He did not disappoint. Katie Braben, who was playing Tammy Faye, was fantastic. Again, Again, as with all the other new shows I've seen this year, very promising, things that they could work on if they want to transfer to like a West End run, but very, very promising for like a new production, and a solid 4-star rating. I then went to see another play. I went to see Good, which is a play that had David Tennant in it. It's set during World War II, and it's about a man who ends up joining the Nazi party, and it's about him sort of slowly moving towards that way of thinking. It was very like thought-provoking play. The performances were fantastic, but I just had some issues with some of the pacing. It felt like as it picked up towards the end, and I could really sort of see what they were trying to convey in this story. It was fantastic, but at the beginning I was just kind of a little bit lost as to what was happening. So this is probably like a lower 4-star, a 3.5 for the actual play itself, but the performances would have been a 5, so we'll just sort of put it in the middle. Everything is pretty much a 4-star, I'm well aware of that, but this way I keep saying which ones are a lower and which ones are a solid 4-star and which ones are a higher, because it feels really harsh to give anything a 3, but also I want to save my 5 stars for the things that I really, really loved, which we'll get to more of those in a minute. Actually, let's talk about me going to the Kit Kat Club, which is formerly known as the Playhouse Theatre. I went to go and see Cabaret, and oh my god, this was such a fantastic production. I saw Cabaret a few years ago and really disliked it because I disliked the production that I went to see. So it goes to show how like a new interpretation of material can completely change your mind on it, because this was a 5-star show. This was so good. I then went to the Apollo Victoria Theatre to see Wicked. It was the first time I'd actually seen Wicked sitting in the stalls, so it was the first time that I'd sort of looked up at Elphaba as she flies, and that was a whole new experience in and of itself. I will say there were some definite sound issues when I was there, like the sound mixing was completely off because we couldn't hear the singing too much over the actual music itself. It was like they turned up the speakers on the music and turned it down on the singing, and it just made it very difficult to sort of enjoy the show. So the actual experience of this visit was probably like a 3-star, but generally I would tend to say that Wicked is like a 4-star show, and the effect of seeing Elphaba fly does bump it up a little bit, so I'm still going to give it a 4-star. I then went to the Phoenix Theatre and saw Come From Away. The 3rd time I've seen it, and it'll be the last time I get to see it before it closes. I love this show so much. Didn't make me cry as much as the first 2 times I saw it, but it definitely did make me cry a little bit, and it's still a 5-star show. I'm aware we probably just had an angle change. I just kicked the camera. I'm very sorry about that. Let's move on to the next show that I saw, which is the last visit to the Piccadilly Theatre this year to see Moulin Rouge. So first 2 times I went to see it, loved the show, didn't like the cast, and it averaged out as a 4-star. This time I went to see it, loved the show, loved the cast. Jamie Moscato as Christian, I'm sure you are all sick of hearing me talk about. This was a 5-star show, and again it goes to show how different times you see a show can be very, very different reactions, because like all this show needed was a good cast. And you know, maybe I'll be going to see a different cast in the near future, and we'll see how I feel about it then, shall we? So I was then back at the Sondheim Theatre to see Les Mis. I've already kind of touched on this earlier. I had a different Javert than the last time I saw it, but I got to see one of my favourite Valjeans, and it's always going to be a 5-star show anyway. I then went to the Shaftesbury Theatre to see Anne Juliet. It's the 3rd time I've seen this show. It's probably the last time I'm going to see this show. I had a good time. I think the thing I can always say for Anne Juliet is it's a fun time. I will say that some of the performers that I saw this time I didn't love as much as when I'd seen it previously, although there were some that I actually preferred to when I'd seen it previously. Again, I'm going to say this is a solid 4-star show. Back to the Turbine Theatre to see But I'm a Cheerleader. It's pretty much same thoughts as last time. There were a few tweaks here and there, and I do feel like the show is sort of, you can see it coming together a little bit more. It's still a 4-star, but I'm still very, very excited to see where the show goes next. Back at Sheffield Lyceum to see Pride and Prejudice, sort of, which is a play that is like a comedic version of Pride and Prejudice. I did not know what to expect going into this, and I had a really good time with it. Again, you can probably guess the rating by now. I'm going to give it a 4-star. Then I went to the Troubadour Theatre at Wembley Park and went to go and see Newsies, and oh my god, this show is spectacular. Like, I am in awe of everything that they do on that stage. I do not know how they have the stamina to do what they do on that stage every single day, sometimes twice a day. This is a 5-star show, there is no doubt about it. I then went to Cadogan Hall to see West End Does Christmas. This was a Christmas concert featuring West End actors. It was an enjoyable time. It was a last minute booking because our other show got cancelled. There were some performers that I really liked in it. Bradley Jaden was one of the featured performers, and then Rob Houchen came on as a special guest. There were some performances that I preferred to others. We'll say it was a 3.5 evening. I then went to the Savoy Theatre to see Pretty Woman. This is a show that I had kind of felt like I should go and see, but I'd not had any like particular motivation to go and see it at any like certain moment. And then we needed a final show to go and see in the weekend. We got rush tickets. I'm not mad that I went to see it, but also it's not a show that's particularly stuck in my head. Like, I wouldn't really be able to tell you many of the songs from it. I don't don't think I'll particularly listen to it again. It was okay for what it was. It was a 3-star. And then I do have one last show to tell you about, but at the time of filming this I haven't actually seen it yet, but I won't actually have time to film this because actually I'm not going to go and see it until the day after this video goes up. But I still wanted to include it, but also it is something very different to anything else that I see because it's a ballet and I don't think I really have the expertise to give it a proper rating anyway. So I'm just going to say that I'm going to Leeds to go and see the Nutcracker. I want to include it on the list, but you obviously won't get thoughts on this one. If you want to see thoughts, watch my vlog next week and I'll talk about it in there. Right, so that is all the shows that I saw this year. It was just like a brief overview of everything because I know that I've been sort of featuring on vlogs and things like that, but it was nice to just go through everything and remind myself of what I've seen. I know I've given star ratings and things in this video, but if you would like to hear a little bit more about my favourite shows that I've seen this year, keep an eye out because that is a video that will be coming up as part of Vlogmas, just to give you a little bit more in depth of why my favourite shows are my favourite shows and also to rank that top 10. So that is everything. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff down below, and I will see you guys tomorrow with a new video. Bye.